Manipulism and the Weapon of Guilt, Collectivism Exposed. Written by Mikkel Clair Nissen. Narrated by David Bucci. Chapter 9. Ambient Socialism. The word social in socialism is completely deceptive regarding the word's true meaning. Social is a word which most are persuaded to think defines communal, together, or sharing. But no, a socialist is but a communist in disguise. The word social in socialism in reality only defines communism's attempt to compete with capitalism's free market by seemingly allowing social class defenses. Yet there is a fierce rejection of even mentioning class difference in democratic socialism, and further, by seemingly allowing ownership of personal property. Caused and controlled by extreme tax levels, you will never truly own anything. Denmark, a nation without a political right wing, has achieved neo-communism. What Danes deceitfully refer to as welfare or socialistic democracy, to deceive people from the truth, is but another attempt to repeat what has been tried too many times before, having previously failed. History suggests that Marxism could work on a voluntary basis in a smaller community, yet it can never work as a society. Socialism democratically commences as liberty. Next it's collectivism, disguised as modern liberalism, deceitfully using the term liberal, then as socialist, and so forth. The goal is to deprive society's citizenry emotionally, thereby creating codependency, and so subliminally moving each and every political party to the left wing of the political scale, effectively achieving neo-communism. Socialism can be summed up as the redistribution of wealth to create social equality by taking from the ones who are more successful and distributing it to all, in the name of placating envy. This lies in contrast to welfare, whose goal is to provide basic needs only for humanity's absolute weakest. Apart from Marxism's seemingly democratic process, Denmark's lifestyle has essentially the same structure and aspects as actual communism. The difference between society being owned by everyone, which is communism, and Denmark's neo-communism is that the government completely controls society with legalized political corruption, from outrageous taxation, of which large tax burdens generally remain purposely hidden. Though no democracy can ever justify stealing, outrageous taxation makes this possible. Along with this is the complete exploitation of the general citizenry inability to leave the country because of nationalistic feelings and family relations. Socialist politics are established on the basis that all are and should be treated equally. These are all self-loving principles, severe pathological narcissism, and hypocrisy at its absolute best. They gladly discriminate by supporting a higher income tax for the more prosperous citizenry, what many have come to refer to as envy tax. Thus, socialist Democrats and farther right collectivists have cunningly outwitted other socialist parties by twisting these Marxist principles to all should have equal opportunities. In search of a scapegoat, Marxism's constant tyrannical and damaging emotional terrorism drives Marxists to turn their feelings of inferiority, hurt, and anger into envy by punishing people who are more successful. Whereas in the case of National Socialists, this need for blame extermination, fascists in general find their scapegoats in other races, groups, or nationalities. Severe pathological narcissism creates envy and the urge to feel equal, and the punishment is a massive support of envy taxes. This again hurts the natural source, the reward for self-motivation and innovation amongst people who would otherwise have reached higher goals. The economic subordination commences. The problem with envy taxes, and taxes in general, can be compared to playing the lottery. People gamble, in pursuit of happiness, taking a chance in hopes of hitting the jackpot. Conversely, the less money there is to gamble, and the higher the reward is taxed, the less people care to gamble. Envy tax is the thin gap between engaging in socialism and living in liberty. Envy taxation is the worst mistake society can ever make, as it is a suppressive tool with one purpose only, allowing Marxists to subordinate society by destroying the more prosperous citizenry, in addition to spoiling personal willingness to strive for a more prosperous life. The assured result is stagnation, for example, economic distrust, lack of investments, businesses moved abroad and outsourcing, and economic oppression resulting in massive losses of employment. This economic subordination of society will, however, sooner rather than later, deceitfully be referred to as welfare. In Denmark, the envy tax increases to 68% if one makes more than $80,000 annually, which is supported by all but one political party in Denmark, the farthest right center-left wing. The tax rate for the lowest income level starts in the range of 37 to 42%. All citizens in Denmark are afforded tax relief on annual incomes below $8,000. Thus, with the extreme high cost of living caused by a sales tax of 25%, on top of further generally hidden duties and fees applied to almost everything, the government levies, on average, easily reach 80%, even for the lower income household in Denmark. Keeping people apathetic with severe pathological narcissism is indeed crucial to the collectivist pathological mind game. In fact, this is evident when Danes are asked how much levies from their earnings are returned to the government by people who are residing in Denmark permanently. Ignorant as most collectivists are, a majority answers, around 40%. Hence, should people start to question reality, this scheme would completely fall apart. In truth, having already reached advanced tax burdens, the government is likely never to raise obvious taxes, those taxes taken directly by the government, for example, paychecks and tax returns. Rather, the government cunningly sneaks upon society through increases in duties and fees since they generally go unnoticed. In this exact part of the collectivist pathological mind game, feminism plays an ever so important role. While feminism can be seen from a positive perspective, having liberated women from certain conservative norms and gotten women into the workforce, in reality, this is a necessary step for governments to achieve exceedingly high tax burdens. Indeed, feminism has seemingly made women freer. The truth, however, is awful and extremely obscured. In fact, with the excessive government tax burdens in Denmark, the average household actually cannot manage a standard middle-class living without two working parents. Consequently, and similar to communism where children are brought up by society, in Denmark's neo-communism, only a few children are ever truly raised by their parents. This in turn disrupts the family ties, thus perfectly shifting the balance from reliance on the family to dependence on Big Mother Denmark, the government. In truth, collectivists envy the prosperous lifestyle. Thus, with excessively high tax burdens and to achieve a middle-class standard of living, Danes are forced to turn to banks. Consequently, making democratic socialism into humanity's most perfect and obscured form of slavery, bank slavery. Fact is, Denmark is built purely on Marxism's planned economy. Danes haven't seen the shadow of any genuine capitalism, free market, free trade, or experienced freedom from non-intrusive government for numerous decades. According to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development data, Denmark factually holds the highest household debt in the Western world as a percentage of gross disposable income. Actually, private household debt in Denmark exceeds the United States by more than double. Consequently, while bankers worldwide assumedly are laughing and clapping their hands over this system, Danes have made themselves into slaves, not only to their own emotions, but to lifelong personal debts as well. Danes are slaves to the exact same elite, bankers and monetary system, in their ignorant view the capitalist system, that collectivists loathe. Metaphorically speaking, society can be compared to a loaf of bread, representing the more prosperous citizenry. The bigger the loaf, the more slices, representing innovation and vital investments it creates, and for each slice, breadcrumbs will drop, representing jobs created. One can never successfully build a nation on punishment for contributing. Indeed, citizens should reward achievements to assure an increase in personal endeavor, the pursuit of happiness. Envy tax brings in short-term revenue, but as the ladder of self-motivation and more prosperous citizenry is subordinated, the actual losses of employment positions, and for the same reason, state tax revenue, are a great deal higher. Some are fortunate enough to be born into wealth. However, one should never forget that regardless how small the percentage paid in tax, the wealthy populace still provides the largest economic contribution to the general public. On top, the wealthy frequently have gone through truly difficult times and taken chances gambling with their personal assets and time, with the risk of losing all their personal assets, to achieve as much as they have. Sooner or later, they create the most important contribution, the most any nation can ever ask for, which is not tax money, but the creation of employment. An everyday story. A perfect example of collectivism's assimilation occurred shortly after my family and I moved back to Denmark from Australia. I remember that it happened one night when watching a live comedy show on television. Suddenly my wife cried out, "Look, Danes are communists! They even clap as one!" She was right. The crowd clapped completely synchronized, something I had often seen, yet never thought about before. It all starts with the weapon of guilt, allowing socialism's average tax increase to nanny society's poorest. This increases the cost of living and will, assuredly, lead to demands for higher salaries. This is, however, to the government's advantage, as it achieves its intended goal, government dependency. All this is for the benefit of government, as it destroys competitiveness for both private businesses and industry and thereby creates recession. Keynesian economics slowly and simultaneously makes its impact during the societal subordination. Independent workers with jobs in the private sector have now been replaced by dependency on government benefits and government jobs. This cycle of state favoritism will continue growing the government as taxes increase and demands for ever higher salaries persist. Free market capitalism is slowly destroyed by the government's bureaucratic interference. In time, it will be replaced with the government's planned economy. Private businesses and industry will eventually shrink to such extremes that the government will need to find money elsewhere. With the prosperous citizenry already overly taxed, the government turns to the middle-class pocket through increases in personal tax and higher, generally hidden sales taxes, duties, and fees. This once again creates demands for higher salaries. Eventually, living expenses rise to extreme levels, 2 to 3 times above average. Taxes and expenses by no means make up for losses from unemployment and the small return of socialism's entitlement benefits. Free market capitalism is replaced with a system of blackmail, tax slavery, and financial oppression, all now cunningly portrayed as welfare. In this progressive subordination, generally hidden taxes, duties, and fees are applied to everything, including groceries and clothing, which hypocritically is harder on the average middle and lower class citizenry, not the few aristocrats left in the nation or the upper middle class citizens. Recently, I went to Burger King and ordered a large milkshake and a Whopper, which with the added taxes and high salaries, consequently cost me about $15. The assured result of high taxation of basic goods is government dependency, which is of course to the government's benefit. Fact is, the world's biggest shipping company, Maersk Sealand, is the only reason Denmark seems prosperous. Without this company, Denmark's lifestyle would literally be no higher than any of the East European countries. The company contributes annual commercial taxes of approximately $7 billion, which is over half of Denmark's commercial taxes in total. One could be persuaded to think that socialism helps the poorest and gives the middle class more. Unfortunately, the truth is quite the opposite. It is absolutely correct that Marxism redistributes wealth. However, when Marxism has destroyed the upper class and results in a depressed economy, there is much less money to redistribute. When the upper class is destroyed, so is the wealth and necessary investments that create jobs. With this comes the subordination of the prosperous middle class. The middle class then bears the burden of the ever more demanding lower class, a process that slowly subordinates the middle class, eventually creating an equilibrated lower middle class. One problem of many with democratic socialism is that it spoils the weakest, through both indulgence and deprivation, thereby discouraging personal effort. People simply stop caring about reaching higher limits. With the social ladder eliminated, this is the case even with behavioral self-improvement. The reason for the reward of accomplishment is corrupted. Consequently, people are disabled from understanding higher values since they never have been nor will be truly tested. The natural chain of self-motivation and innovation, incentive, is immobilized. and the populace is weakened. The certain result is an enormously deprived lower middle class who constantly demands more be given to it, rather than giving to others. Slowly the nation reaches stagnation. A majority of society's citizenry will eventually go as far as to speculate if one actually cares to find employment or if one should exploit the government benefits. And just as society's citizenry will exploit the entitlement system, with its inviting big fat nanny advertisement, so will immigrants naturally do anything to utilize the immigration system to get a piece of it. The truly disruptive part is that government bureaucracy purposely makes it difficult to build a business. Irrefutable proof affirms that business ownership leads people toward liberating themselves. Once the average collectivist's life situation changes, self-esteem begins to increase. The person can now take better care of themselves and first tries to pay high taxes. Then the collectivist gradually begins voting for farther right political parties. Collectivists generally have no problem voting for political parties that support higher taxes, but no one queries working for money under the table. Both examples prove the collectivist's hypocrisy and lack of empathy. Collectivists are prepared to exploit others for personal gain and willingly do to others what they would not want others to do to them. Everything in neo-communism is under government control. No bank account or pharmaceutical purchase is private. In truth, there is nothing in Denmark over which Big Brother is not in complete control. The Danes are the world's highest taxed people. The infrastructure is completely monopolized, corrupted by state favoritism. The government is in fact the country's biggest employer, in direct competition with private businesses and industry. Similar to communism, in the neo-communist system, almost everything is owned by the government. This includes administration of employment services and postal services, transportation, including aviation and airports, buses, subways, and railways, and public services such as communications and power plants. In addition, the government has control through its oversight of education, or government indoctrination centers, daycare, schools, and universities. Moreover, many are dependent on public housing. Getting into a government apartment project generally takes under 5 years in rural areas, yet placement can take up to 25 years in the denser populated cities. The state even owns television and radio stations, corner stores, and hotels. Controversially caused by government favoritism, these hotels are the 2 tallest buildings in the country. The assuring result is even further governmental favoritism, since people rely upon jobs in the government for their livelihood. The title government official practically works as a status equivalent to Communist Party members in China or the former Soviet Union. These egomaniacs are untouchable as they are never found at fault regardless. This protected status is applied to anyone working within the government. So no one can indulge themselves more than others. The envy tax on a car is 180%, which easily brings a car valued a bit over $20,000. For example, Honda Accord, in the United States, close to an astounding $50,000 in Denmark. This is not to mention that the average cost of achieving a driver's license is close to $2,500. Almost no one owns a new car in Denmark. Banks generally do. Once again, hypocritically, the very same bankers that the collectivists despise. So the majority ride bicycles, drive a second-hand wreck, or utilize the triple overpriced public transportation. And now that green is the newest trend, reasons as to why to ride a bicycle give them yet another excuse to make up their pathological lies. The same result is achieved in Denmark's neo-communism, as is in a country where communism has been accomplished by an obvious and direct fascist military takeover. In all cases, one is given just about whatever one needs. Excessively high salaries, Denmark's being among the world's highest, creates imaginary prosperity. Even after an average low-income tax of around 40%, one seems prosperous. The bliss, though, is short-lived, as the deceptive part is hidden in the triple overpriced living expenses, the result of the extremely high service costs caused by these tremendously high salaries. And the overall cost of living is so high that an average hard-working middle-class citizen rarely dines out. Finding revenue for a decent vacation is not something one does with ease. Nor is covering the dentist bill and daycare, which are the only entitlement benefits that are not completely free of personal charge yet, unless one receives welfare. This struggle to afford simple luxuries, in turn, assures the perfect environment for continual envy. The ignorance of democratic socialism is, however, only bliss for as long as the malign narcissistic tyranny balances out itself with the blinding tools of fictive contentment, found in the government's bribery with entitlement benefits. Margaret Thatcher, also known as the Iron Lady, once said, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money, which is exactly the point in time when government addicts, mandates in need of their daily fix of adulation, attention, or affirmation, narcissistic supply, and so addicted to gambling for other people's money, start making up for the lack of funding by taking out loans to nurture the lower middle class's ever-increasing demand for more, and thereby attain their necessary fix of admiration by vote." Gambling problem, also known in technical terms as Ludomania, is the urge to continuously gamble despite harmful negative consequences. Hence, the political acts of a corrupt collectivist syndicate that exploits the authority invested in the power of democracy, thus infiltrating the government for the purpose of blackmailing its fellow citizens, is no more a democracy. A society controlled by a government, empowering itself through blackmail and bribery, gambling for votes with stolen private assets, is more appropriately referred to as ludomocracy. For the liberated observer, only now does the truly amusing part begin. The government is now in need of make-believe and will, therefore, devise any excuse to defer and manipulate its citizenry in order to persuade them that higher taxes, duties, and fees are absolutely necessary. This is, however, no problem, as society has now achieved a totalitarian state. These deprived, ignorant citizens, weakened by severe pathological narcissism, are living in a fantasy world. They are in awe of authority, convinced that the government takes care of them, because the dog never bites the hand that feeds it. Therefore, they don't question or criticize society or society's structure, unless, of course, something is to be taken away from them. Controversially, the argument every time for raising taxes, duties, and fees is, the government knows best and you, the citizenry, can't think for yourselves. Your government will, therefore, have to take away your rights of personal choice and raise taxes, duties, and fees on items, for example, tanning services, soda pop, fattening products, as they are unhealthy. Marxist parties will never decrease taxes. They might state their intent to do so, but being the manipulative, pathological liars they are, they will only give some in one place while taking from somewhere else. Debates began in 2011 around a politician's living example of a poor person in Denmark with the pseudonym Poor Karina. Her story epitomizes learned helplessness, excessive entitlement, being the story of a 36-year-old mother of two on welfare since she was 16. Karina had received cash and benefits, for example, free daycare, education, medicine, reaching in the proximity of $500,000. Karina's personal claim was that she was so poor that she could not afford a cinema ticket for her child on her monthly government benefit of around $3,000 after tax. However, when the debating politicians entered her decent apartment, it was discovered that she had an upstanding living arrangement with nice furniture and a flat-screen TV, not to mention that she was able to maintain her 500 kroner, $100 per month smoking habit. Her case is just one amongst tens of thousands. Let us not forget the abundance of substance addicts and alcoholics whose addiction is in fact sponsored by the taxpayer. Again, government bribery, money for misery, with absolutely no intent to solve the actual true origin of the matter. The reason Karina gave us for being unable to afford a cinema ticket was that she had just bought a brand new sofa for $900. Entitlement benefits, for example, Social Security and other similar entitlements, being taxed in ways identical to capital income and genuine earned income allows yet another illusion among collectivists. The ideal elusive argument, for the deprived mind, is that the recipient pays tax like any other citizen. Consequently, this allows the perfect excuse for taking part in the democratic process and being entitled to benefits, since one is a contributor to society. Rhetorically, one asks, How, in fact, can people who are not contributing to society, who are obviously not competent enough to make educated decisions in their own lives, and for that reason on behalf of society, still be given the responsibility of taking part in the democratic process? How can these people who have proven themselves incompetent have the right to dig the grave for all of society by voting themselves handouts of other people's money? Stories such as poor Karina's are the strongest evidence to support the case that a person should be able to vote only for as long as one contributes to society. Being part of the voting process should be a reward and pledged as an honor. The essence to a democracy is, in fact, complete government transparency. However, Denmark has already passed laws keeping Denmark's citizenry from inside knowledge into the movements of government mandates. Additionally, in Denmark, anyone can vote without a valid picture ID. Consequently, electoral rigging is a fact. Thus, with government transparency gone and voter fraud unrestrained, Denmark has long ago proven itself a tyranny. Socialism, democratically, is calculated tax slavery. To this day, it stands as the smartest and most obscured form of political corruption on record. Justified blackmail by abusing the power of democracy, a society slowly eating itself by the tail. A quote by Karl Marx: "Democracy is the road to socialism.